Hello, and thank you for coming to the Safeguard Estate and Financial Estate Planning webinar. Hi, my name is Jeff Sykes. I'm going to be your speaker today. I'm an estate planning consultant here with Safeguard Estate and Financial. My normal duties is I meet with people in their homes and help discuss and set up their estate plan. I work for Safeguard. We're an estate planning firm here in Scottsdale, Arizona. We have offices in Scottsdale, Tucson, and Oro Valley. Our team has over 50 years of combined experience, and we've helped over 20,000 Arizona residents with custom tailored estate plans. Estate planning is what we do, so we are very good at what we do. And my goal today is to teach you and help you learn some things about estate planning. I'm going to teach you the nuts and bolts of what a proper estate plan looks like, and I'm going to go over the different ways that you can defend yourself against those vulnerabilities. This is a look at our office here in Scottsdale, where I'm currently sitting, but we do have offices in Oro Valley and Tucson. Okay, this is the part where I have to tell you that I'm not the attorney. I'm not going to be giving legal advice on any specific facts, but I am going to teach you a lot about how an estate plan works, what it's supposed to look like, and where the vulnerabilities lie, and how to solve those vulnerabilities. If you do business with Safeguard, our attorney's name is Mark Hall. He's been an estate planning attorney in Arizona for over 20 years. He's very good at what he does. We're very proud of Mark. Not only is Mark a very good attorney and a specialist in estate planning, but he's also one heck of a nice guy, family man. I've worked with him for a number of years, and I'm proud to call him my friend and colleague. Great guy. And so, the first bit of advice I can give you if you're going to do an estate plan, use an attorney that specializes in estate planning. It's that way with almost any other legal issue that you have. If you're going to go to an attorney that specializes in whatever endeavor you're after. When it comes to estate planning, I can tell you the biggest benefit you're going to get is it's going to cost you a much more reasonable cost, because you're dealing with an attorney that is well versed in estate planning. It's what he does. And so you get the economy of scale. And not only that, you're going to get a document that's much more streamlined and easier to settle. It's just a better deal all the way around. Okay, so let's talk about the three types of people that tend to come to these workshops. The first type are those of you that have nothing in place. If you have nothing in place, the word for that, the legal term, is called intestate. And what that basically means is this: in the state of Arizona, if you have an estate that's worth over $75,000, then you're basically eligible to go to probate. And if you have nothing in place, which means you have no plans, well, then probate court is the destiny for your family, because none of your assets will be able to be transferred to your family members until it goes through a probate judge. Now, the next type of people that come to these workshops have a will in place. Now, if you have a will in place, it is in a much better position than if you have nothing in place, because you have a plan, you have a list of things you want to have happen. But there are some deficiencies in a will, some areas of concern that I want to talk to you about, and I'm going to do a whole section on wills, so you'll be up to date on wills before we get through this. And then those of you who have a trust in place, if you currently have a trust in place, congratulations, you have the best tool available to you at your disposal. There's really only two ways to deal with your estate plan. You have a choice of a will, or you have a choice of a trust. And a trust is a much stronger tool. It's what we call a non-probatable device. And I'm going to get into trusts and very extensively. I'm going to guess a lot of you are here to learn about trusts. Well, I'm going to do my best to make sure that by the time we finish this webinar, you're going to have a very firm understanding of kind of what a trust does and how it protects you. Okay, so let's talk about the problem. Most of you are here because you want to avoid probate, and I don't blame you. Probate is an issue. In this case, it shows a judge with a gun to the head of this poor old couple. I don't know if it would be that drastic, but it's not a very pleasant experience. Everybody I've talked to that's been through probate doesn't have much good to say about it. So let's talk about the issues with probate. First, let's talk about what is probate. And here it says probate is the judicial process where a will is proved in a court of law and accepted as a valid public document that is the last true testament of the deceased. Well, look, this first line where it says probate is the judicial process where a will is proved in a court of law, that should be your first red flag about wills. A will was intended to go into probate and be proved in a court of law. But let's give you a little broader picture of what probate is. Probate, in a sense, is about the ownership of your assets. So say we'll talk about a home. You own a home. You have a bank account. You have a car. You have an investment account. These are all assets that have your name on the title. And in order for them to transfer from you to your loved ones, they have to travel through an institution, a bank, an escrow company, and on and on. Department of Motor Vehicles for your cars. Well, when you are on the title of your home and you pass away, now nobody owns the home. So what you have to understand, this is what probate does. Probate is a courtroom where a judge determines who owns an asset that no longer has a living owner on the title. And so that's the issue that you have to deal with. And so anything that you take ownership of that asset to the grave, now a judge has to determine who owns it. So that's kind of what the probate court does. And so let's talk about the problems with probate. The first issue with probate, it's commonly the people's biggest issue is the cost. It is not a cheap experience. Nobody can tell you exactly what one probate case versus another probate case is going to cost. They vary dramatically. What we do know in the state of Arizona, the court costs range from 6 to 22% of your estate. For this exercise here, if you look at this pie chart, the blue represents the court cost and the red represents the attorney's fees. What we did was we used 10% for the court costs, and the attorneys are going to get about the same. And you know, the reason we use 10%, a couple of reasons. The first reason is obvious. 10% is a nice round number. It's easy for people to understand. But secondly, it's on the lower end of the average, and quite frankly, it is a more than reasonable assumption. In fact, I'm going to tell you it's a little bit on the conservative side. But here you're looking at a $500,000 estate, and between the attorneys and the courts, about 20% of it goes to pay for your probate case. And so, the cost of probate, if you assume that it's going to cost your family about 20% of your estate, I think you'd be, making a pretty safe assumption. The other element of probate is that it is a huge waste of time. Here it says at any given time there are more than 20,000 active or pending probate cases in Maricopa County, with more than 500 cases being filed each month. Arizona is a pretty prodigious retirement destination. People come here, they retire, and then eventually they pass away. And so now you have this big logjam in the probate system. What that means to you on a time basis, the average time through probate in Arizona is 1 to 3 years. So you got the cost and the time. Another bad element in probate is the loss of privacy. See, anything that happens in a courtroom creates a public record. So anybody can go to the clerk's office and find out everything they want to know about your estate, who's involved, how many assets are involved, who's getting what, who's in charge. You can kind of have that public loss of privacy, but it extends further than that. When you go to probate, a judge will freeze all of the assets, including the family home. And then they're going to send out a team of auditors, and they're going to basically take an assessment of the home, which means they're going to go through every drawer and every cabinet. So you've got to understand that the loss of privacy extends kind of intimately into your home. Something else that I want to make you understand is when you go to probate and you have somebody living in your house and you pass away, if they're not on the title, when the judge freezes the home, he's going to remove everybody that's not on title in the house. So one of the vulnerabilities I want to talk to you about that that is typical that we see all the time is this. You've got your husband and wife. Somebody passes away, and the surviving spouse goes a few years, and then they meet somebody. Out in Arizona, there's retirement communities all over the place. So you meet somebody, you don't get married, but they become your significant other, and maybe you move them into your house. Now, you may not want that person to receive your home when you pass. You want your home to go to your kids. But you can make arrangements in your estate plan to set it up so that if you passed away, they can remain in the house. And then when they pass away, the house can be sold and the proceeds can be given to your kids. Well, if you have nothing in place, that person that you have living with you is in a very vulnerable position, because when you pass, a judge is going to remove them from the house, and they'll be doing that very unceremoniously. So if you have that situation, you're going to have to deal with that with your estate plan. So that's something that that a lot of people don't realize, but it's a very big vulnerability that we see all the time. A judge will make somebody that he puts in charge of the estate put an ad like this that will run in 3 publications for 6 months to all heirs, creditors, contingent creditors, and all persons who may be interested in the will or estate of. It's basically an invitation to make claims against your estate. You know, who knows who's going to show up, but that's kind of the nuts and bolts of how the probate system works. It's very expensive, takes a lot of your family's time, and it's a complete loss of privacy. So let's give you a little example of how it happens. So now we're back to the title of a home, the title of a bank account, title of a car, title of an investment account. Here you have a husband and a wife. Let's look at this like it's the title of a home. Okay, so in Arizona, you live in what they call a community property state, which means if somebody passes away between a husband and a wife, theoretically, it should be easier for the surviving spouse moving forward because they should own the asset. Deeds are very sensitive documents, and so a deed has to be done correctly. A deed should say the husband and or the wife owns the home with right to survivorship. And that's very important because when you buy a house, you signed a stack of documents, about a foot thick. You initial in a million different places, and you have to sign your name on several documents. And within those documents is the deed of your home. Well, you sign all that paperwork, and then it gets filed. We have to understand that people that work at title companies are human and they make mistakes. And about twice a month in our attorney's office, a surviving spouse will be in the attorney's office having to deal with getting clear title of their home because the deed wasn't done correctly. So it's very important. The deed say that the husband and or the wife owns the home with right to survivorship. Many of you have never seen your deed because it's filed with the county and you don't have a copy, but you can go to the county website and look up your address and check your deed. Very important because you don't want to be chasing around attorneys and courtrooms after you lose a spouse to get clear title of your home. So okay, so let's look at this title, and we're going to assume it's done correctly. Husband passes away, that leaves the wife as the owner of the home. What happens when the wife passes away? Who owns everything? And that is what a probate judge does. That's what their job is. Find ownership of an asset that no longer has an owner on the title. That's how that works. So let's talk about wills. So the first of 2 different choices that you have when you create your estate plan, one of the ways you can go is a will. There are vulnerabilities to a will. Remember that line from earlier in that early slide where it says probate is a courtroom where a judge proves a will in a court of law to make it a valid public document? What that basically means is a will was designed to go to probate. That's the reality. They don't all go to probate, but they were designed to go to probate. And because of that, about 70% of wills in Arizona end up in the probate court. Okay, so let's talk about why this happens. So you have this will. Let's make up an estate. You have a husband and a wife. So the will says, I'm a husband, I have a wife. If I pass away, I want my wife to get everything. If my wife doesn't survive me, I want my kids to get everything. And then you name an executor. And it says the same thing in reverse for the wife. I'm a wife, I have a husband. If I pass, I want my husband to get everything. If he doesn't survive me, I want my kids to get everything. And then you name an executor. Okay, so when you pass away, the will says I want these things to happen, but the will doesn't own anything. So alongside that will, you've got a home where you took ownership to the grave. You have a car, you have a bank account, you have an investment account. All these assets with your name no longer have an owner on the title. What that will was designed to do was to go into the probate court to be used as a guideline for the judge. The judge puts a court order behind those wishes that you have in your will and makes them legally binding. But until a will goes into the court, it's not a legally binding document. And because it's not a legally binding document, your executor will run into problems when they get to the different institutions. If you take a will and a death certificate into a bank, there's a very good chance that the bank will not release the money to be given to the beneficiaries until the will is what they call proved in a court of law. They're going to tell the executor, you need to notify probate and have the will proved in a court of law, then we can transact what's on that will. If you take a will and you try to sell a home, the escrow company is going to stop the transaction from occurring until the will is proved in a court of law. That's the main fundamental weakness of every will. They're not a legally binding document until they are gone through the probate system and the judge makes it a public document that is legally binding. So that's the first problem with the will. And because of that first problem, your will can be contested. What you have to understand about a will is the minute you take ownership of your assets to the grave, there's no tools in the will from people making claims against those assets. So there are certain elements that of your family that can cause problems. If you have an estranged child that you want to leave out of your will because you haven't talked to them in 30 years, well, if they come out of the woodwork when you pass away, there's nothing stopping them from making claims against your assets and taking your estate into probate. Also, you have to be very careful about what you do as far as how you set up your distribution, who you're giving your assets to, because if anybody doesn't agree, there are no tools in the will to stop the family from disagreeing and making a claim in the probate court and dragging the whole family through that process. I'm going to give you kind of an example of an estate that innocent enough, good intentions, but can oftentimes lead to the probate courts. So you have a husband and a wife. They've got 3 kids. They've got 2 older boys and a younger daughter. So they raise their family. The older boys, they grow up, they move out of the house, they have families of their own. And then a few years later, the younger daughter, she graduates high school, she goes to college, she meets a young man, they get married, and the husband and the wife at that stage in their life are able to help her and her new husband buy a new home, and they think, it's so expensive. Let's help our daughter with a down payment on their home so they can get their life started right. So they give them the money to help them buy a house, and they buy a house. And then when they set up their estate plan, they say, okay, we're going to make up. We weren't able to help the boys, so we're going to give them a little extra when our estate is settled. Then we give our daughter, kind of even things out. Perfectly innocent, perfectly reasonable, pretty common actually. So now they both pass away. The executor goes to grab that will and read it to the family. And of course, the daughter is stewing in anger because she's not getting an equal share to her older brothers. Because, in things like this, people's memories get short. In a situation like that, there are no tools available in that will to stop that younger daughter from dragging the estate into probate. A will is quite simply a probatable device, and when you take ownership of your assets to the grave, you're giving anybody that wants to make a claim against them standing in the courtroom to be heard. And so that's kind of how this thing works out. So when you set up a will, you've got to be very cognizant of what you're doing and the family members. And even if you don't have family members that are going to fight, you still have to have that battle with the institutions because you took ownership of your assets to the grave. And that's very hard to deal with the will. And because of that, 70% of them end up in the probate court. And so you have to think about this. If you're going to put together a will, you have to make a very honest assessment about your family. There are certain elements of certain families that are just simply problematic. I talked about one of them already with the estranged child. There's no tools to stop an estranged child from coming back. People talk about, well, I'm going to leave them $1. It just doesn't work. And so you have to analyze your situation and think to yourself, do you have the appetite that a will presents? Can your family afford to lose 20% or more of your estate to the probate system? Blended families. We talk about those situations where you have to analyze and be honest about. This is a big red flag when it comes to doing a will. You have a husband and a wife. They each had children of their own. They get married a little bit later in life. Sometimes they bring their own assets to the picture. This is a wonderful situation. I'm from a blended family. I think blended families are very typical and common. But when the parents pass away in a situation like this, what ends up as a family ends up looking more like 2 warring tribes. And this ends up in probate in a lot of cases. There are other things to look out for. Family conflicts. Some families, the kids just fight. The sibling rivalry started at birth and they go on to this day. You know, I have my mom's side of the family and my dad's side of the family, and one side is very, very peaceful. Everybody gets along really well, very loving. And on the other side of the family, you never know who's talking to who. If you have a family dynamic like that, you know, you've got to be honest about it. And maybe a will's not right for you. And so when we're looking at setting up an estate plan, the two elements we look at, first is the size of the estate. Well, if they're going to get 20% of your estate, and that's a conservative estimate, the larger the estate, the bigger the bite out of that apple it is. Also, you have to look at your family. If you have a family that doesn't get along, or there are people in the family that are going to cause problems, you have to take that into account when you're looking at putting together a will. And then, do you trust everybody? You know, you have to look at the extended family. When I see this, I think of sons-in-laws and daughters-in-laws, because they whisper in your kids' ears and they can create entitlement where it maybe shouldn't belong. They've been the root cause of many a probate case. And that's kind of the downsides of a will. I think if you do have a will in place, you got to understand where you really stand out there. And there's your weaknesses. Those are the issues. Okay, so now that we talked about wills, let's get into trusts. A trust is a little bit of a different animal. I want you to think of the trust like a box. So what we're talking about today is called a revocable living trust. And what that basically means is this. The person that sets up the trust is called the trustor. When you hear the word trustor, I want you to think owner. So the trustor is the person who owns the trust. So when you set up a trust, the trustor is the owner. They create the trust, and as long as they're alive, the trust is alive, hence the living trust, which means it can be changed, it can be revoked. You can add assets, you can remove assets, you can add people, you can remove people, you can change the instructions. So if you're a married couple, you would be set up as co-trustors, co-owners. You would also be set up as trustees. When you hear the word trustee, I want you to think manager. So in the case of a married couple, you'd be co-trustors and co-trustees, owners and managers. So you got this box and you put the assets into the box. And so what this sets up is a situation where you own the trust owns the assets. And as trustor and trustee, you have full control. When you pass away, you need somebody to come in and manage the trust. So you have the trustor and the trustee. If one of them passes away, the other one, the surviving spouse, is the trustor and trustee. But when the second spouse passes, you have your successor trustee come in to be the manager of your trust. Think of the successor trustee like your successor manager. It's a parallel position to the executor of a will. But the difference is this. The minute that you sign a trust, it becomes a legally binding document. And that is a big difference from a will, where a will doesn't become a legally binding document until it goes through probate. And the difference is this. When your successor trustee goes to follow the instructions in your trust, they have a legally binding duty to do so, but they also have a legally binding permission to do so. So when they go to sell the family home, the escrow company is going to let the transaction occur. The family home will sell. The escrow check will be written. It will go into your bank account, and then the bank will write checks to your beneficiaries. If the successor trustee walks into the bank to distribute the bank account to the beneficiaries, the bank's going to release the money. See, being a legally binding document, it allows for the successor trustee to settle the estate. They don't need an attorney and they don't need a courtroom. That's one of the biggest, that's where the two plans start to diverge from each other right there at that point. The successor trustee is legally bound to follow the trust, and so that also gives them the tools to keep anybody from contesting. Remember, the trust is an ownership vessel. So the day before you pass away, your trust owns your assets. The day after you pass away, the trust owns your assets. Ownership is continuous. Because there's no loss in ownership, you can't just have anybody come along and make a claim against those assets. There is no legal standing in the courtroom for them to make a claim against your assets. And so your successor trustee has a legally binding duty to distribute the assets according to your instructions. Something else to take note of: when the second of the trustors passes away, the trust goes from being revocable living trust to an irrevocable trust. So the successor trustee doesn't have the ability or the responsibility to be able to make any changes to the trust. All they can do is follow instructions. So your instructions go with you to the grave, and they stay in effect for as long as it takes the trust to be distributed and settled. That gives the successor trustee some strength. So let's go back to that same scenario where you have the two older sons and the younger daughter, and the distribution was set up unequally. Well, when the daughter has a complaint and she's upset about not getting an equal share, she can go to the successor trustee, and the successor trustee can say, look, these are the instructions in the trust. I have no power to change this. I have a legally binding duty to distribute according to these instructions. If I try to change it, this legally binding trust, I'm committing theft and fraud, so I can't commit a crime. If you try to change it, the no contest clause says you lose your share. So what you've got here is a situation that is not probatable. That estranged child, if you leave them out of the trust, they have no recourse to come in and make claims against the assets because the assets never lost ownership. So now you have this really good situation where the trust can be settled very smoothly, quickly, and easily with no judges and no attorneys. I like to call a trust buy once, cry once. You pay the money, you set it up, and then this trust will last you the rest of your life. One of the good elements of a trust is it's a legally binding document in all 50 states. It's regulated by the federal government. It's got federal language in it that allows it to be good no matter where you live. So if you set up a trust in Arizona, this trust will last you the rest of your life. If you move to another state, your trust will still be valid in that state. Another thing that a trust will allow for you to do is protect assets all over the country. So if you own a home in Arizona and you have a home in Wisconsin, you can put both homes in your trust, and they're both protected, and they both will stay out of probate. A will is a state-based document. One of the other weaknesses of a will is it's only good in the state that you're in. So if you are that same person that owns a home in Arizona and a home in Wisconsin, you can, if you live in Arizona, your will could protect your home in Arizona, but it won't have anything to say with the home in Wisconsin. If you have two homes like that, really a trust is your only option. If you realistically want to stay out of probate and have everything moved to your kids without trouble, a trust can solve that situation very, very easily, because you can put your home from both states there. And you know, so you set up a trust that's good for you the rest of your life. Now, if you set up a will and you live in Arizona and then you move to another state, you're going to have to do another will that's reflective of the laws in that state. Just a good information for you to know. Okay, the other participant in the trust is the beneficiary. Okay, so let's talk about a little contrast of the beneficiaries in a will. So they both have beneficiaries. You're naming, these are my kids, or whoever you want to get your assets. Well, because the trust is an ownership vessel and it doesn't pass away when you do, the assets can stay in your trust indefinitely, which means that if you have a rental home and you don't want your kids to sell that rental home, you can make instructions in the trust that the home is not to be sold for 20 years after your death, and your kids will benefit from the rental income. It basically gives you the ability to control your distribution and customize it. When you have a will, because the will doesn't own anything and there's no place for the assets to be held in an interim basis, when you pass away, everything distributes to your beneficiaries in a lump sum. And that's great for a lot of beneficiaries, but not all families are created equal. Not all beneficiaries are equal. There are a lot of circumstances where a lump sum of money is a bad idea or harmful. You know, I'll give you an example. What if you've got somebody that has a history of substance abuse? And if they were to get a $200,000 infusion of money, that could end up in a tragedy. With a trust, you can say, look, we want you to get your share, but you're going to get this amount of money per month till your share runs out, or you're going to get a certain amount of money at this age and a certain amount of money in this age. And there's a lot of different scenarios where this is beneficial to you and your family. You know, if you have a situation where, we can go back to that situation where you have a spouse, you know, a widow or a widower who meets somebody new. They move them into the house. They are their significant other. You're not married to them, but if you pass away, you don't want them to be removed from your house. What you want to have happen is you want them to be able to remain in the home till they pass away, and then the home can then be distributed to your children. Well, the trust allows for you to do that because the trust can hold your home in trust for the length of time you determine. So you can say, okay, I want my significant other to be able to live in the home till they pass away, and then my successor trustees to sell the home and distribute the equity to my beneficiaries. You know, you have situations where you have adult children living with their parents because they have some kind of a maybe autism or something that keeps them from being able to take care of themselves. And you're worried about, well, what are we going to do, or what's my son going to do when we're no longer here? Well, the trust allows for you to solve that problem. Look, we want our son to be able to live in this house till he passes away. We've got a fund set up here in the trust. We've got our successor trustee set up. If my son needs money, my successor trustee can manage his financial affairs. And so now you've been able to set up a situation to make sure that if you're not here, everything's going to be okay with that child. You know, you could have a situation where somebody's on disability, and if you give them a large lump sum of money, it will interfere with their ability to collect their benefits. Well, with the trust in place, you can set it up so that they get just enough every month to stay under the threshold so that they don't lose their benefits. It's really a good tool. You have control of your assets from the grave, but you can set up your trust and set up your distribution customized to the needs of each beneficiary that you want to make part of your estate. It's really a nice tool. Okay, so let's look at how it sets up. Okay, so you have John Smith and Jane Smith. They own their home, their car, their bank account, their investment accounts, and we set up a family trust. And so here you have John Smith and Jane Smith set up as co-trustors and co-trustees of the Smith Family Trust. When you look at the title of a trust, you have to understand the titles are very important because the title is what is going to go on your assets. So if you were to set up a trust today, it would be called the Smith Family Living Trust, dated August 17th, 2021. The date that you sign your trust is also included in the title of your trust. And so we create the trust, and then we take the assets and we move them into the trust. When we move assets into the trust, the term that we use is we fund the assets into the trust. And so let me tell you how that works. Okay, so once you create the trust, the way that you fund an asset into the trust is you take the asset and you retitle it into the name of your trust. So the way it works here at Safeguard is your first appointment is with the attorney, and the attorney builds the trust around your family, who your beneficiaries are, who your successor trustee is, who the trustors are, and all their information, all the distribution instructions. You know, all of that is what the trust is built around, all the family information. When you set up a trust, there's redundancy set up across the board. I'm naming this person to be my successor trustee, and if they're unwilling or unable to do it, then I want this person to do it. And if they're unwilling or unable to do it, then I want this person. These are my beneficiaries. If this one doesn't survive me, I want their share to go to their spouse, to their kids, back into the trust to distribute to the others. So that anything happens to anybody that you've named in your trust, you've set up their replacement, because tomorrow's not promised to anybody, and we want this trust to last the test of time and not have to be changed. And so everything has redundancy across the board. Okay, so then the attorney takes that information and he creates your trust. You come back in a couple of weeks later and we'll present your trust to you. We'll go through it. We're going to make sure that all of the information that you transmitted to the attorney translated properly, all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, all the names are spelled correctly, all the instructions are put there according to your wishes, and then you sign it and it's witnessed and notarized. Okay, when you sign a trust and it's witnessed and notarized, that brings it into existence. It's his birthday. So now the trust is a legally binding document. So now we have to put the assets into the trust. One of the things that we do at Safeguard here is we're going to go through your funding from A to Z and make sure that your trust stays funded properly. One of the most important elements of having a successful trust estate is making sure that it stays funded properly. So the way you fund an asset into the trust, the first asset we talk about is the home. We bring up the deed of the home. We put the trust on the title of the home. The Smith Family Living Trust, dated August 17th, 2021, goes on the title of the home. So now you own the trust, the trust owns the home. When you put the trust on the title of a home, it's going to protect the home and everything inside of the home. It creates what they call a residual estate. It will even protect your automobiles. And I bring up the automobiles because automobiles tend to be a very disposable device. You buy and sell cars. Some people buy and sell a car every year or every couple of years. Well, the thing is through the residual estate, when you sell a car and buy a new car, it will be covered by your trust, and your successor trustee will have the ability to liquidate that asset that vehicle according to your instructions when the time comes. So it's very convenient in that way. But also, all of the assets in your home are now covered. Then we go through the rest of your assets, bank accounts, investment accounts, insurance policies, and we help walk you through the process of putting those in the trust. That's called our funding services. And then we call you every 12 to 18 months. We make sure that you didn't make any changes, maybe closed a bank account and then opened a bank account in your name, that we have to help you address. We want to make things as easy as we can for your family, and so it's very important that your trust stays funded properly. So I'll give you an example. Say you have a bank account that's in the name of your trust. It's covered by your trust because the trust is on the title of that account. Well, if you pass away, who owns that bank account? Well, your trust does. And you've left instructions to your successor trustee on how it's to be distributed, and that asset can be distributed without any problems. But if you open a bank account in your name, even if you have a trust in place, and you pass away, who owns that account? Nobody. See, that account wasn't properly funded into the trust. And so we want to make sure that you don't make changes like that throughout your life, because we don't want your family to have issues. There's a will inside of a trust called a pour-over will that has language in it that will allow for your successor trustee to pull that asset into the trust and distribute it through your trust according to your trust instructions. But it could require attorneys and courtrooms, and we don't want to test that theory. So we provide what we call ongoing funding services. Now, the funding services are important because I'll tell you this: I do a lot of trust reviews where somebody went to an attorney 10 or 12 years ago. They had a trust created and they put it on a shelf. There was a checklist in the front that they didn't pay attention to, but they didn't do any funding in the trust. And so I'm sitting at their dining room table with them going through their trust 10 or 12 years later, and we get to the part where we talk about the funding, and there was no funding in that trust. Heaven forbid something would have happened. They would have had a real mess because there were no assets in that trust. What you had was basically an expensive paperweight. Safeguard will never let that happen. We're not only going to make sure your trust is funded properly from the beginning, but we're going to help keep it funded with you throughout the years, and none of that adds any cost to our services. It's a really nice service that we provide, because when the time comes, your family breezes through this process without any issues. It's pretty nice. Okay, so now you've got the trust in place. John Smith and Jane Smith are co-trustors and co-trustees. All the assets are in the trust. All the instructions are there. And now John Smith passes away. That leaves Jane Smith as the sole trustor and trustee. She's got control of this estate. She owns the trust owns the assets. One of the good things about a trust is between a husband and a wife, when one of them passes away, the surviving spouse doesn't have to do anything. There's no ownership issues whatsoever. She can just mourn the loss of her husband. But then a few years goes by and Jane Smith passes away. And what that does is it triggers the successor trustee to come in to be the manager of the trust. The trust is now irrevocable, can't be changed, and the successor trustee has all the authority to basically settle this estate without any attorneys, without any permission from anybody, according to the instructions in the trust. And so the key with the trust is there's never a lapse in ownership. The day before you passed away, your trust owns your assets. The day after you pass away, the trust owns your assets. That creates a non-probatable situation that can be settled quickly, easily, without the cost of attorneys. The reason I call trust buy once, cry once, because where you really save the money is at this time right now. There's no attorney fees, there's no court costs, there's no time in court. The trust settles simply and easily without any probate or any attorneys. One of the things that we do at Safeguard, part of our services, when your successor trustee grabs your trust book after you pass away and they go to settle the estate, they're going to call us, because right on the inside cover of the trust, it says if you're the successor trustee in the process of distributing assets from this living trust, please notify Safeguard, and it's got our number. What we do is we bring them into the office. 9 out of the 10 people that you'll name to be the successor of your trust, they'll have never done it before. Now look, a trust is not hard to settle and it doesn't require an attorney, but they're going to open up that book and go, oh my gosh, where do I start? And they're dealing with a few different elements. First, they're dealing with the loss of a parent, which is one of the most devastating things you go through in your life. They got family members going, well, what's going on? We bring them into the office and we kind of make it very clear. Look, this is what you do first. We prioritize everything. This is what needs to be said to these people. We're there with them through the process. They can call us at any time. We take the mystery out of the legal documents. We just make it very, very easy. It's one of the best things that we do. The look of relief on the people that walk through our door as successor trustees, it's a pretty wonderful thing. And it's available to you. It's part of what we do, and it doesn't cost your family or your successor trustee any cost. So now, before we talk about the next stage, let me go through a rundown of what it looks like to settle a trust. Okay, so one of the things when you fund your trust, you need to have at least one bank account in the name of your trust. We call that your trust account. It's like the hub. And so let's use a family home as an example. So you have your trust, it's on the title of your home. You have the trust, it's on the title of your bank account. You have 2 kids, and you want each kid to receive a 50-50 share. Okay, so your successor trustee grabs your trust book and he orders your death certificate, and now your whole estate is open to be distributed according to the instructions in your trust. And so the successor trustee talks to the kids, and the kids decide that they want to sell the house and split the equity. So your successor trustee puts the house up for sale. It goes into the escrow process. Again, the permission is granted, so there won't be any holdups there. New owner will take possessions. The trust will come off the title of the home. The new owner's name will go on the title, and the escrow company will issue an equity check, and that check will be made out to your trust because that's who owns the home. Then your successor will take that check and deposit it into a bank account that's also in the name of your trust. And then they can go to the bank, and the bank will write 2 checks, one to each beneficiary, and then that part of the estate is settled. It's that quick and that easy. That's how it works. Now, everything I talked about up to this point, all of it dealt with your assets and ownership of your assets and how they interact with the probate system and why they end up in the probate system and what a trust does and what a will does. All of that's asset-based. That's only one piece of the puzzle. What you have to understand about your estate plan is it must protect you when you're still alive. And so let's go have a little review. When does a will take effect? Well, a will takes effect when you pass away. You see, a will doesn't have any tools in it available to you when you're alive. So if you're in a hospital bed after some kind of a health emergency and you're still alive, you may not be conscious, you may not know what planet you're on. You are still alive. The will doesn't have any tools available to you in that situation because it doesn't actually have any effect until after you pass away. But when does a trust take effect? Now, a trust takes effect the minute that you sign it. So it becomes a legally binding document the minute you sign it, which allows for you to put instructions in there to deal with situations that occur while you're still alive. It has tools available to you when you're still alive. And I'm talking about when these kind of things happen. Look, I would love for everybody that's listening to this webinar today to get really, really old, go crawl into bed, and just pass peacefully in the night. But statistically speaking, a lot of us aren't going to be that lucky, and things are going to happen along the way, like stroke, Alzheimer's, mental incompetence, car accidents. Here's how this works. If you have a plan in place, you're going to be able to appoint people to make decisions for you on your behalf. And so think of 3 chairs around a table. In one chair, you have your power of attorney for medical decisions. What you're saying is, if I become incapacitated, I'm assigning this person from my family to make medical decisions on my behalf. And in chair number 2, you have power of attorney for financial decisions. If I become incapacitated, I want this person to be able to pay my bills, keep the trains running on time. If I have a stroke, I don't want to come out of the hospital in foreclosure and without electricity. So you got to put somebody in a position to have the power to pay your bills. And then the third chair, this is really what separates a trust, is the conservator of your estate. If you have a meaningful incapacity and you have to be put into a memory care facility and your home has to be sold to pay for it, well, the trust allows you to name a conservator that has the power to make and execute those decisions. And so here's how it works. If you nominate people that you know and trust, whether they're from your family or not, you put somebody in each one of those 3 chairs around that table. Well, now if something happens to you, those people have the ability to step forward and make those decisions. Because a trust is a living document and has power while you're alive, you can actually put instructions in your trust to guide those people making your decisions. If I become incapacitated, I don't want to have my hospice care and be in a facility. I want it to happen in my home. I don't want to be put into a memory care facility. I want to be kept in my home. You have the ability to do that with the trust. And so the way it works is this. You name people to fill those 3 seats. Something bad happens to you, and they step forward and they handle these situations. The issue happens is when you don't put people in those seats. If you haven't nominated people to step into those roles, well, then a judge is going to nominate an attorney from the court to step into those roles and make those decisions for you. And now we're talking about someone that doesn't know you, doesn't care about you, might be managing 60 other people. They don't have any instructions to go by. And so now they're going to be making decisions about where you're cared for, how you're cared for, how much it costs, what assets they're going to sell to pay for it. I promise you, you get in that situation and there won't be anything left for your kids, and you suffer the indignity of being put in some government county contracted facility. You got somebody that's not monitoring you like a loved one would. The thing about a trust is it allows you to keep all of the issues that can happen within your family, people that you know and trust, people that have skin in the game. And so I'm going to give you an example, because people always ask me, well, I have a son, I have wife, I have a husband. How can I become a ward of the state? Which is what you become if you don't have a plan in place and you become incapacitated. Well, this is Terry Schiavo. This happened back in the 90s. I bring this one up because it was kind of a famous case, talked about a lot in the country. She lived in Florida. She was, I believe, 27 years old at the time, and she had this massive heart attack. Well, 27-year-olds don't tend to become incapacitated. They definitely don't tend to have heart attacks, but she didn't have an estate plan in place. She was married. She had a couple of kids, and she has this massive heart attack, and then they wheel her into the hospital. She's unconscious. Well, in contrast to that, let's say you're going to go to the hospital, and you're going to have surgery on your foot. Somebody will drive you to the hospital. You'll check into the hospital, they'll give you a stack of documents, you sign all the documents. Well, when they do that, there's usually a document that they give you to sign that gives somebody the ability to make your medical decisions in the event that the surgery goes wrong and you're passed out on the table, because if you're passed out on the table, they can't ask you, so you empower somebody to make those decisions. Well, in Terry Schiavo's case, she didn't have that opportunity because she was wheeled into the hospital already unconscious. They hook her up to life support. And this is that point where I have a husband, I have a wife. Well, the husband was not named to be her conservator. He wasn't named to be her power of attorney. So he went to court for 8 years, and finally he wins in court. And meanwhile, she's hooked up to life support. And the judge appoints him to be the conservator, and he has the feeding tube removed. 3 days later, the feeding tube was put back in because the mother contested it. You see, when you don't have a plan in place, you don't have decisions made ahead of time to guide anybody, and it's contestable. And so the mother contested it, and she put the feeding tube back in, and she was on life support for 15 years. Can you imagine the daily cost of being hooked up to life support, let alone 15 years worth of it? There's nothing left of a estate by the time that happens. So the thing is just because you're married, don't assume that your spouse has those decision-making processes. The way the court treats it is the court looks at families like they don't know the conflict of interest, so they appoint what they call a quote-unquote neutral person. Now, of course, you can hire, your family members can hire an attorney, and they can retain that power, but the time and the money, if you set up a proper estate plan, you set up a trust, all those positions are filled by people in your family, so they can step right in and make those decisions for you. And in the case of Terry Schiavo, an estate plan would have been a good thing. Here, look, I don't do scare tactics. I just want you to understand the vulnerabilities. This was taken off the judicial branch of Arizona. Judges and commissioners assigned to the probate and mental health department oversee over 9,000 active guardianship cases, over 500 million in conservatorship assets, and over 3,000 active orders for treatment. So this is just one county in Arizona. You got 9,000 people that are what they call wards of the court, where an attorney from the probate court is determining where these people are cared for, how they're cared for, how much it costs, what assets they have, if they're going to be sold or not. You lose control of your estate. It's not a dignified situation. I don't want this to happen to anybody, but this does happen to quite a few people, 9,000 people on a rolling basis. So that's what you're up against. And so when you set up your estate plan, if you set up a trust, this can't happen to you. That's the reality. The trust can prevent this. The trust is the best way to prevent this. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of a living trust. And so when you set up an estate plan, your living benefits need to be as follows. You have a power of attorney for healthcare decisions and financial decisions. You have a conservator. When you set up a trust, your successor trustee is named to be your conservator. That's how it works. So your conservator is the successor trustee. One of the things I haven't talked about, the authorization to physicians or the living will. Okay, so if you end up on life support, what a living will basically says, if I end up on life support and two doctors of the same specialty determine that my death is imminent and I'm not going to survive with a normal quality of life and all that other language, I want to be removed from life support, I want to be kept comfortable, and I want to be allowed to pass naturally. And so now you have an estate plan that covers you no matter what happens. If you pass away, your assets have a legally binding way to travel with no cost through your trust to your family members or whoever you name. If you become incapacitated, you've put people in place to make medical decisions and financial decisions. If you have a meaningful situation that has to be dealt with incapacity, you have a conservator basically to make those decisions for you. If you end up on life support, you've got a plan in place that can be executed according to your instructions. And so what that living will does is first of all, it prevents you from being hooked up to life support for an extended period of time, in which case the hospital absorbs the value of your estate through the attrition of being hooked up to those machines. But also you're removing that decision and the guilt of that decision from anybody in your family. Nobody's going to go home and have to put their head on a pillow and have to think about the ramifications that they just had to unplug mom or dad. You're making a decision, it's executed according to your instructions, and nobody has to live with that guilt. So now, no matter what happens to you, incapacity, death, life support, you have a plan in place that can be executed according to your instructions, and it goes very smoothly and easily. It's a wonderful aspect of a trust. You know, and you worked your entire life for what you have. Don't you think it makes sense to protect your estate before you pass on? I know it's a redundant question, but people tend to put this stuff off, and it gets, the procrastination kicks in. You know, none of us like to think about our own passing, but it really is important that you put something in place, because the mess that it leaves behind not only will affect your family, but if you have in a case of incapacity, it can really make a mess of the end of your life. A revocable living trust allows your heirs to avoid probate entirely, keeps you in complete control of your finances while you're alive. You can always make changes to what's in the trust and how you'd ultimately like it managed or dispersed. So let's talk about this. When you set up a trust, the best thing I can say in a nutshell is life will go on like it always will. And this is what I mean by that. If you put your trust on the title of a bank account and you want to add money to that bank account or remove money from that bank account or close that bank account, you're going to be able to do that like your trust doesn't exist, because you're the owner of your trust and the manager of your trust. You've got the authority to do that. You're not going to need any permission from anybody. The relationship you have with your assets is not going to change. If you have say your trust on the title of a stock account and you like to buy and sell stocks, you're going to be able to buy and sell stocks like you always have. As long as you leave $1 in the account, it'll be part of your estate. If you want to close an account, that account simply ceases to exist. It is no longer part of your estate. You don't have to ask anybody permission or tell anybody or go see an attorney. If you want to sell your home and then buy a new home, here's how it works. You put your family home for sale like you always would. It's going to go through the escrow process. Your trust is going to come off the title. Your new owner's name is going to go on the title, and that home is going to leave your estate. Once you have your trust in place, you are going to title your assets in the name of your trust when you acquire them. So you make an offer on a new home. It goes into the escrow process. You say, look, we have a trust. We want the trust to go on the title. And when this clears escrow, the trust will go on the title. That home will then become part of your estate. If you want to open up a bank account and you already have a trust in place, bring your trust with you. You walk into the bank and say, look, here's a cashier's check. We'd like to open an account here, but we want this trust to go on the title. They'll open the account in the name of the trust. That account will now be part of your estate. You don't need to ask anybody permission. Now, trust can be changed, and there's two kinds of changes that you make to a trust. The first change I just talked about, adding an asset, removing an asset. It'll never cost you any money, and because of our ongoing funding services, if you call us and you need help, we'll do that, and it will not cost you anything. The other kind of change to a trust is called a amendment. Now, your trust is set up with redundancy in mind. There's replacements all over for every position. If something happens to somebody, the next man comes up. But there are things that happen. Maybe you want to add somebody, or maybe somebody does something and makes you angry and you want to remove them. Maybe you have a situation like this where you have a successor trustee. Now, if something that were to happen to that person, you have their backup. But what if they get in a bad accident? They get put on pain medication and they're on that medication for 2 years and they're addicted to the medication and they're not the same rational person they were when you put them there and you want to remove them. Well, you have to amend your trust. We used to try to do free amendments, but because we have so many clients, 20,000 clients in Arizona, you get people that are very fickle. My daughter made me mad. We want to take her out. And then 2 weeks later, well, we changed our mind, want to put her back in. And you get about 50 or 60 people doing that, and our attorney would never have a living, breathing moment the rest of his life to bill another hour. So we had to put some skin in the game. So an amendment like that will cost you a couple $100. It's very reasonable. They're not very typical. But one of the things that we pride ourselves here at Safeguard is we're very transparent. You're never going to get an, oh, by the way. You're never going to get some bill that you don't know about. We want everything to be out in the open. So that's basically how that works. And so let's talk about the cost of a trust. Okay, so how much does a living trust cost? This is out of Kiplinger's magazine. Remember when I talked about getting an attorney that was a specialist in estate planning? Well, this is why you do that, because the average cost around the country, you can usually get a will, basic trust, and a durable power of attorney for financial matters and for healthcare for about $2,500 to $3,000. And I'm going to say that's true. I see that all the time. If you walk into our attorney's office, Mark, his regular price is $19.95. For those of you that know that you need to do this, that have been putting this off, or the time is now, we would love the opportunity to earn your business. Look, we are very good at what we do. We take very good care of our clients. But if you're interested in starting the process, it's very easy. And we're offering you a webinar special of $9.95. It's half price. It's a fantastic price, especially you're going to get a trust done with no corners cut. It's going to be prepared by a proper estate planning attorney. You're going to have our funding services, our settlement services. It's a fantastic price. And, one of the things people say, well, what does it include? Well, in a nutshell, it includes everything, but let's go over what it includes. So it includes the trust itself, which means it includes the trust, the attorney's fees, and the attorney consultation. Within the body of every trust is what they call a certificate of trust. It's 4 or 5 pages. It's got all the pertinent information that a financial institution needs to retitle an asset in the name of your trust without all the personal information. So if you had, say you had a stock account in New York, you would mail them a copy of your certificate of trust in the process of retitling that asset. Very, very easy. I talked a little bit about the pour over will. It's a will that's got instructions in it that allows your successor trustee to move an asset that you didn't put in your trust through the trust and distribute to your beneficiaries. You have power of attorney for medical and financial. Those are included. Here on the list is HIPAA. for the doctors to be able to speak to your medical power of attorney, they need a HIPAA waiver. HIPAA is the Privacy Act. So they need a waiver to get past the Privacy Act so that they can speak to your healthcare power of attorney, tell them what's wrong with you so that you can help make decisions on their behalf. Of course, we talked about the living will, that's included. We're going to prepare and record one Arizona deed. Now, this is the only thing that can change the cost of your trust. We are going to put the trust on the title of your home, your primary residence, and that's included in the $995. We're going to create the deed, we're going to file it with the county, pay the county fees. You get a new deed in the mail with the trust on the title. Now, any additional properties that you own in Arizona, we can put those in the trust for you, but that additional cost of $120 per property. We can do out-of-state deeds also. They vary, but the average cost of an out-of-state deed is about $200. So if you own a rental property in Arizona, your trust will be $995 plus $120 for the additional property. Now, you don't have to pay us to do the deeds, but it's not a bad way to go. Deeds are sensitive documents. We have a virtual title office in our office, and we have a person that's an expert. That's all they do, and they will do it right. The language will be right, but that's how that works. Of course, we're going to provide the funding assistance when we set up your trust and through the rest of your life. We're going to have complete settlement assistance to your successor trustees. That's all included. We're not going to charge them any money when they come in and we help them settle the trust. And then we create a couple of emergency contact cards. They look like little credit cards. It's got our name and number on the front, and on the back, it's got all the information for your powers of attorney. You keep those in your wallet, in your purse, and they can be found by the hospital administration, and then they have the numbers to call to get the right people to the hospital. And it's a pretty nice little extra touch. And so it includes everything. There'll be nothing left for you to do except maintain the funding of your trust, which we can help you with. And so in a nutshell, the $995 does include anything. And so, you know, a little bit about us. Look, we're very prideful of our reputation. Anywhere you go on the internet and look into us, you're going to find glowing reviews because we are very good at what we do. We will take very good care of you. We would love the opportunity to earn your business. To get this started, we don't need to take any money from you today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come to a form in the next few slides. It's got a form that's got a web address. You jot that down, you put it into your web browser, and it'll pull up a form. What that form has is all the basic information that the attorney needs to create your trust. It's a good starting point because everything that you know, you fill out. Everything you don't know, you make a list. You hit submit, and then I can get in contact with you, and I can help set up an appointment with our attorney. You can meet with the attorney. Like I said, we have offices in Oro Valley, Tucson, and Scottsdale. We can do Zoom meetings with the attorney, in-person meetings with the attorney. If you aren't comfortable, you can do a phone call with the attorney. And so basically, we gather that information from that form. I call you. We put you on the attorney's calendar. You meet with the attorney. If you like what you hear from the attorney, you're going to choose to move forward. If you don't like what you hear from the attorney, then you won't be any other obligation. So the first step is you meet with the attorney. If you like what you hear, you're going to pay him $430. He's going to set a delivery appointment. You're going to come back in a few weeks later. We're going to go through the trust and do the delivery, make sure everything is correct. You sign it. It's witnessed and notarized. We go through all the funding, and then when everything's done and you approve, the balance is $565. And then you'll have an estate plan that will last you the rest of your life, and we will take good care of you. And when I talk about our attorney, you know, from our initial interaction through informative meetings to the final product, our experience with Safeguard Estate and Financial was top-notch and extremely professional. Derek, Jeff, Mark, Julie, Tom, awesome, knowledgeable, friendly, consummate professionals. I recommend this team without reservation and know that our family trust protects our estate into the future. That's just who we are. Like I said, we are very good at what we do, and we would love to earn your business. Here's the slide to that form I was talking about, http://safeguardevents.com/form. Now you're looking at a video, so you can't click on that, but if you can type that into a web browser, fill it out the best you can. Like I said, you don't have to have all the information all today. You fill out what you know. When we get you on the calendar, it's going to trigger a series of events. We're going to send you an email. It's going to have a detailed explanation of what that attorney meeting is all about. You're going to have my personal direct cell phone number. You can call me and I'll walk you through anything. I'll answer any questions. You'll have our office number. You'll have our address. You'll have all the information, and then you'll come meet with the attorney and we'll get this process going. And It's very smooth and easy. It's not very stress-free. But I want to thank everybody for coming. I hope you learned some things today. I hope I didn't bore you to death. This stuff is very important, but it may not be always the most exciting information. But I hope you came in with more knowledge and are leaving with more knowledge. But please, we would love to earn your business. Fill out the form, click submit, and I'll get in touch with you shortly. I want you to all have a great rest of the day, and thank you for coming. I'm going to leave this up for about the next 15 minutes. So fill out that form, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.